What's up? I'm Anthony. So it's been like a week now since the American football player Colin Kaepernick set off a firestorm by refusing to stand for the national anthem before a game. I'm sure you've heard of the story. As a quick reminder, this is a quote. Colin said, "I'm not going to stand up to show pride in a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color. There are bodies in the street and people are getting paid leave and getting away with murder." That's a direct quote from him. This is obviously a reference to the number of police shootings taking place all over the country, many of which now are being captured on video for all of us to see. It's been a polarizing stance, to say the least. I think it's about time you and I talk about it for a bit. So the initial incident took place about a week ago, but I purposely avoided addressing it because I want to give myself some time to really understand what was happening here, especially being prior service myself. In that time that I gave myself, I noticed one glaring point of irony, so I guess I'll start there. One thing I noticed is as soon as Colin sat for the national anthem, many people immediately vilified him. They burned his jersey. They called for him to be fined and fired. They called him a terrorist. One guy called for him to be deported. He's from Wisconsin. They wished him injury, death. The whole thing quickly deteriorated into a horrible racist name-calling fiasco. And they did it that day for sitting peacefully. Now, the irony is that many of those same exact people who were so quick to condemn Colin, who broke no laws or NFL rules, nor did he disrupt or distract anybody from what they were doing, those same people were upset at him, but can watch video of a police officer shooting an unarmed citizen to death and say, well, let's not rush to judgment. Let's wait till the dust settles. We don't know what happened before the clip. That's a popular defense line, right? We don't know what happened before the clip. Just showing the video can take the situation out of context. And that is true, but it's also a two-way street. So let's see what happened with the national anthem before Colin chose to sit. The War of 1812 was a war in which the United States were fighting against the United Kingdom for a number of various reasons. Primarily, the United States was pressing up into Canada, trying to take over land that the British controlled. The Brits weren't having it. War ensued. At this time, slaves had already been brought into the United States under the most brutal and heartbreaking conditions imaginable. They were literally being worked to death. British government, being aware of the situation, actually established a policy by which runaway slaves could find amnesty with British troops. Because of that, thousands of runaway slaves ended up fighting for and becoming an integral part of British forces. So in 1814, 2 years later, after a really rough battle, a particularly tough battle, Francis Scott Key pens what would later become our national anthem. And by this point, you've probably already heard mention of this third mysterious verse in the national anthem, a verse in which the author makes reference to capturing and or killing runaway slaves. If you haven't heard that, it's true. It's part of the national anthem. We just don't sing it anymore. The same national anthem that Colin Kaepernick refuses to stand for, citing systemic racial injustices. It is interesting, especially in full context. Another interesting side note to this particular war is that not only were United States forces fighting Brits to the north, they were also fighting Native American forces to the west, who were trying to stop United States expansion. Remember, at this time in history, Western expansion was only around the Ohio, Indiana area. Also remember that before Europeans showed up in the Americas taking claim to land and saying, we own this now, the idea of owning land was completely foreign to Native Americans. Many of them couldn't even wrap their mind around the concept of owning the land. Their attitude was, this is the earth. How can you own the earth? At any rate, the United States expansion continued. Many years of bloodshed passed, And although there's no specific mention of killing Native Americans in the national anthem, the United States forces were fighting Native American forces during that War of 1812 when the anthem was written. So to me, there's a certain bit of twisted irony in the fact that that national anthem will be played every Sunday for an NFL team with the name Washington Redskins. Redskins. So as we look at Colin Kaepernick sitting, just as we look at the videos of the police officers that are shooting the citizens, which is the reason he's sitting, let's try to look at everything in context. And that's where the whole situation comes all the way back around to remind us that everything connects, because context is synonymous with understanding. But understanding doesn't come from forcing your perspective on something. It comes from seeking to make sense of a perspective that you don't currently hold. See, we live in a time where the quickest, most divisive, most outrageous responses to something often get the most attention because it's easy, it's comfortable, and it doesn't require us to stretch ourselves, to grow, to expand our understanding. But the difficult, often uncomfortable act of broadening our consciousness is the only way to understand the world around us in its full context, right? Like the famous quote says, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. So what you see in Kaepernick sitting, as in everything, is a reflection of yourself. If you're really willing to look, your feelings about the situation, this situation or any situation, tell you more about yourself than they do about the actual situation. Everything originates from within and everything connects. So how do you feel? Critical, judgmental, angry, hostile, or loving, understanding, compassionate, empathetic? See, the ego is tricky, and it'll inspire you to feel all these low-level thoughts and then convince you that you're justified in feeling them. You're damn right I'm angry because XYZ. But that's a trap. It's a trick because energy is reciprocal. What you give, you get. You reap what you sow. These are age-old truths. I'm not making this up. So when you respond in anger and criticism, you're responded to in anger and criticism, and nothing changes. It's a common mistake to think the best way to get your point heard is to yell it loud. The best way to convince somebody that your view is valid is to denounce and attack theirs. You're on social media. You see this play out every day. Somebody posts something they believe, yay, my guy. Meanwhile, it comes along with a backhanded swipe at somebody with a different position, boo, your guy. And before you know it, everybody's falling right back in line with what they already believed. There's never any progression of understanding when this happens. I heard a lot of people recently praising different people for, quote unquote, telling it like it is, from political pundits to political figures, pop culture people. There's videos being shared. This lady tells it like it is. That's all the trap of division. There is no telling it like it is. There's only telling it as you see it from your vantage point. And if someone else shares your perspective, then what they say can resonate as a quote unquote truth to you. But there's not the truth. It's a perspective. And when we realize that, we can become less attached to our own ideas because we know they aren't exclusive truths. They're not truths that need to be defended. They're just our perspectives. And there's proof of this everywhere. That's why you can see a situation like the Colin Kaepernick deal, and you have people telling polar opposite renditions of the same story, both being touted as telling it like it is. Now, obviously, it's okay to have principles you believe in, but when they close you off to consideration of different opinions or views, then understanding suffers. And this is what we need right now, a progression of understanding. And this progression isn't something that can be regulated by law. It can't be mandated by government agencies or forced onto people. It's got to take place within individuals. It's got to start with you. It's got to start with me. So I'll leave y'all with this, and I'm sorry I've gone on longer than I intended to. As far as the actual sitting out of the national anthem, I fully support and respect Colin's right to sit. It's part of what I fought for as an American soldier. I also fully support and respect that some people feel he's wrong. Everything in context. Were parts of the national anthem based in racist ideologies? Yes. Was slavery atrocious? Yes, of course. Are there still certain civil injustices? Without question. But also keeping everything in context, white lawmakers and politicians did abolish slavery. Hundreds of thousands of white Americans gave their lives in the Civil War to ensure that all Americans are free. And we're currently ending our second term of having an African American family as the first family of the United States of America. Are we a perfect country? Hell no. We never were and will probably never will be. But we can continue to move closer to perfection, both as a nation and individually, if we keep learning and listening to each other with an open heart and an open mind. That's the only way we're going to grow. Me personally, I'll continue to stand with pride during the national anthem. And I do so not because of the author's idea of America when he wrote it, but out of respect to the America that we have become since then, and to the potential of the America we still might be. So I gently encourage you, my friends, as you move forward, keep these two words in mind. Everything connects. I'm Anthony. Love and respect.